Olá, bem-vindos e bem-vindas, bom dia a todos, eu sou Denise Barbosa e estamos aqui mais uma vez para uma McKinsey Talks que já se consolidou como um espaço para conversas ao vivo com os maiores experts do mundo sobre temas relevantes para a agenda de negócios. E o tema de hoje é o imperativo de experiência para o novo consumidor. I'm going to switch to English to introduce our participants. First of all, Alex Rodrigues, partner in McKinsey Miami, and leader of North American Retail Customer Experience Service line. Good morning, Alex.
Good morning.
And Kronschnabl, associate partner in McKinsey, New Jersey, and co-leader of North American Retail Customer Experience Service line. Hi, Anne.
Good morning, Denise.
Fernanda Hoefel, leader of the Consumer Goods and Retail Practice in Brazil. Hi, Fernanda, bom dia.
Bom dia.
And Pedro Zemel, CEO of Grupo SPF, which owns Lojas Centauro and Nike's operation in Brazil and has recently acquired NWB and also is a YouTube content producer. Hi, Pedro, bom dia.
Bom dia.
Vale lembrar que vocês poderão fazer perguntas a qualquer momento, durante toda a sessão, utilizando o campo que fica à direita da tela ou embaixo do seu celular. Por favor, contribuam, a participação de vocês é fundamental. Today, we will start with a brief presentation on the theme of the session led by Alex and Anne, and then we will have a conversation with Pedro, Alex, and Anne, mediated by Fernanda. Over to you, Alex and Anne.
Thank you, Denise. If we could project the presentation, please. So Anna and I are going to talk about the CX imperative for the new consumer. So in the midst of the pandemic, consumers have fundamentally changed. And as a result, retailers are having to very quickly adapt to meet the evolving needs of that consumer. Focusing on customer experience just makes good business sense. Our analysis of the past recession in 2007, 2008 shows that those companies that really focus on customer experience show a lower drop in recessionary periods and a much faster recovery coming out of that. And as you can see from the analysis, they can create much more value for their shareholders in the long run. So as we as McKinsey have actually looked at what omnichannel leaders have done in order to drive customer experiences and drive that performance, we see 5 fundamental things. The first is the obvious one in the midst of the pandemic, which is they've had to transform their operations. They've had to transform the way their stores work to keep both customers and their staff safe. Second, they're having to double down on digital. They're having to think about their digital capabilities, their channel investments. They're having to rethink their performance on their websites. They're having to think about product fulfillment and many other elements related to digital. Third, they're looking to innovate on omnichannel. They're looking to enable a more seamless experience across channels. They're rethinking delivery mechanisms to customers to drive both convenience and safety. Fourth, they're having to rethink their whole physical network of stores. They're having to think about the size of the full network. They're having to think about the roles of individual stores that will remain during and after the pandemic. And finally, as a core enabler to actually drive this performance and drive this innovation, they're adopting increasingly agile practices in the organization to allow them to actually move faster, fail faster, learn faster, and drive innovation at speeds they were not able to achieve before. Let me hand over to Anna.
Thank you, Alex. So what we've seen throughout the pandemic is an unprecedented growth in digital adoption. For example, in the US, we saw online spending increase 35% in just 1 year. And that means that retailers have to adopt to this new reality with a digital experience that's much more important than it used to be. So the first thing is actually thinking through, how are you going to drive traffic to your digital assets, being your website or your app? And then it's about, how do you increase conversion when people are on your website or in your app. I've seen with some of my clients that small design changes and optimizing the flow and making the digital experience more frictionless can drive up to 10% in revenue increase. To give another example of this, the load speed typically should be 2.7 seconds per site. And every 100 millisecond delay in that load speed can reduce conversion by up to 7%. So actually making sure that the online experience that you provide on your website is crucially important. And then, like Alex mentioned, it's about how do I fulfill all of these orders, making sure that you have enough stock if you think about buy online, pick up in store, or curbside delivery options. And then these digital journeys also offer new opportunities to engage with CRM, loyalty, email campaigns. And so it actually opens up more touch points with your customers. If we go to the next page, we've also seen that retailers beyond the purely digital experience are actually thinking about how can they create a seamless and engaging omni-channel experience where they combine the physical and the digital aspects of the experience. And so, number one, we've seen retailers bring the physical experience from the stores online. One example here is jewelry brand Kendra Scott. They actually launched a virtual augmented reality try-on experience where customers were able to try on virtually jewelry before buying them. We've also seen retailers launch more delivery options. To Alex's point of an agile way of working, Panera, which is a food and bakery chain in the US, within 2 weeks when the pandemic started, launched a grocery delivery service where consumers were able to order products from Panera, but also were like finished products, but were also able to add groceries to their baskets and get it delivered to their home. So very fast turnaround, a completely new channel of these delivery mechanisms. And then the third thing that we saw emerge were strategic partnerships where retailers are partnering with other companies together to help them broaden their reach, get to new consumers, and with that, help drive sales, but also offer more convenience for the customers. An example here is there's a shoe retailer in the US called DSW, and they have been partnering with grocery retailers to offer a limited selection, but offer shoewear in grocery stores, which is a good convenience for consumers and customers because now they can shop for some of their shoewear in grocery stores. If we move on to the next, there is also, of course, implications from this digital shift on the physical network of the stores. With more traffic online, we've also seen a decline in traffic in the physical stores. And with that, retailers are forced to reevaluate their strategy for their brick and mortar network and what role their locations should play within their network. There's no question, of course, that stores are critical to the customer experience and they will continue to play a role in customer experience. And at the same time, we see retailers reevaluating what the role is of the store, how can they complement the online experience. And so with that, many are also taking a critical look at the size of their total store network and the different types of formats that they have. When we look at physical store networks, we typically segment stores along four-wall profitability, which is what you can see here on the x-axis, and the cross-channel strategic importance to identify potential actions that you might want to do with your store network. And so the stores that currently have high profitability and that are super important, you want to transform them, you want to grow them, right? Those are key to keep and maintaining your network. The stores which have high profitability but are not so important from a strategic standpoint, you want to reopen them, you want to keep them, maintain them, just, stay with them as they are. Then you have stores that might be lower on the profitability currently, but they're actually super strategically important for you. And for them, here it's how do you reassess their role? Maybe it should be a different format. Maybe you're going to make it into more of a dark store fulfillment node, right? What are the things that you can do with the space since it's important? And then For the stores in the network that are not profitable and that are not very strategically important, looking at renegotiating the lease or considering closure. With that, I'll hand it back over to Alex.
Thanks, Anna. So as I mentioned at the start, Agile has become a fundamental enabler for innovation for high performers. It enables much better cross-functional collaboration. It empowers people to bring their ideas forward, and it just ups the speed. And the results can be pretty staggering, both on the impact on the customer, the reduction in time to market, a reduction in costs, and actually, once again, contributing to that value creation for shareholders. So finally, as we think about how retailers can actually move to action quickly, the first thing they have to do is, in the midst of the current situation, fundamentally understand where their customers are at, what are their needs, and how have those changed. Second, with that deep understanding of the customer, think about how they can actually address these changing needs across all of the channels they have at their disposal. And finally, think about how you can get started with smaller steps, be use case backed, fail fast so you can pilot and then refine your ideas before you scale them and move quickly.
Thank you. So let's start the conversation. Pedro, the first question is for you, right? I mean, we spoke before this conversation, right? We were talking about how Grupo SBF has been, a role model actually in terms of, thinking about customer experience. And this is something that you started in the industry way before customer experience was a hot topic. How has your vision about this topic evolved in the past years, given, all the changes in consumer behavior that we have seen?
Yeah, I don't know whether we're benchmark, but we do take the topic seriously and try to work accordingly. I think that the first time we discussed customer behavior was about channel. So there was a huge discussion whether the brick and mortar world would be completely disrupted by e-commerce players. And that's 2017, I would say. It took Bezos to buy Whole Foods for us to believe that stores could have a space in the future. And that was the first time we had to tackle that conversation. We had a pure player, a competitor in Brazil, a relevant one, and we were a brick and mortar player. And then it was omni-channel. So it was how to serve consumers across channels and how to leverage brick and mortar space to actually boost digital, and how to use that as a competitive advantage against pure players. The world of e-commerce had the advantage of customer service, basically. They could deliver things faster. And through 200 stores across 26 states, if we were to have an omnichannel approach, we could have better service than any pure player would ever have in Brazil. So that was the first time I would say that we had a deep conversation and change in our business model on customer experience. But then it evolved. It evolved to a discussion on whether retail was enough to have the kind of relationship we needed to have with our consumer, whether we needed to be more present and relevant in their lives through having a more frequent and recurrent relationship with them, and maybe the transactional nature of retail would not fulfill that role completely. And that's when we moved to figure out other ways to tackle these consumers and trying to build this ecosystem of sports with brands, with distribution, and with content.
And in this future, right, Pedro, in which retail might not be enough, as you put it, right? What is the role in stores in this larger ecosystem?
I strongly believe in stores, and I kind of believe in that. What's being challenged is the transactional part of stores. So if you have stores to change product for money, then there might be more convenient ways to do so. But consumers navigate through channels on a very fluid manner, and I think that in companies we kind of put barriers between that movement of consumers because of our own challenges and not because of the consumer experience. So the store for us is a place not only to sell products and to showcase the brand, but to serve as fulfillment center for the e-commerce and to capture consumers. There are several consumers that go into a store, and they are new consumers to our database. And then if we can connect to them, we can then sell online. So we're trying a bunch of things. We're trying to map the navigation of consumers in stores and then try to retargeting afterwards. So dealing with abandoned cart and so on. So I think the stores will be very relevant. I think that the challenge is not to think about channel, but to think about the consumer, and then use each piece of the relationship you have with this consumer to enhance the kind of experience he or she would have with the brand.
That makes a lot of sense. Alex, you are in touch with lots of retailers in Brazil and elsewhere. How do you see other retailers thinking about the role of the stores, and how would you advise retailers to think about their store networks when they consider the issue?
I love what Pedro said. Like Pedro, I agree. There will be a role for stores in the future. Despite the accelerated movement towards digital, stores are here to stay. However, the role they play has fundamentally changed. I think retailers are having to rethink, as we mentioned before, first and foremost, the size of their network. So I think Anna described how to think about profitability versus the strategic importance of the stores to determine whether they should exist going forward. And if they do, what role do they play? And like Pedro said, I think something that will not go away is the ability to capture consumers. I think something that will not go away is the ability to provide a differentiated experience in the store. I think they can continue to provide convenience, instant access to products, but then importantly, more memorable things like an introduction to a product or deep expertise that someone in the store can provide me with while holding the product or while engaging with the product. So as a result, I think that will certainly keep them in the future. However, increasingly, I believe customers will need a real reason to come to stores. When I can order just about anything from my phone, I really need a good reason to leave my house and actually go to a store. And once again, I think it's all about what Pedro said. It's all about, am I providing convenience? Am I providing safe and quick access to products? And am I actually leaving them with something that they will find memorable and increasingly worth it for them to invest their time in going to the store? And so I think, we see different actions from different types of retailers. Obviously, a grocery retailer is in a fundamentally different position now. They're much more on the convenience and the immediate nature of the product acquisition, together with differentiated experiences in some of the top players. But when you move towards apparel or you move into sports, and indeed something that Pedro knows so deeply, then it becomes very much experiential and truly engaging with a product, even using them, and seeing the impact those can have on people's lives and learning about them. So I think, once again, stores are here to stay, but high performers are rethinking the role.
And then, of course, I would imagine omnichannel becomes, increasingly more important. It's something that we have been talking for the past 10 years, but when you think about, a truly integrated ecosystem, right, or network, omnichannel becomes key. And Pedro, Centauro has been having a very successful trajectory in omnichannel, right? And you said yourself, this is something that started many years ago. What are the key challenges and lessons you had in this journey?
So we're a 4-year-old company, and we started as a brick and mortar retailer. And so the first challenge was to develop the digital channel. And that went from 0 to 5% to 10% to 20% of the business. That's before the pandemic. And half of what we sell online is served through the store. So 30% click and collect and 20% ship from store. making that connection was the real first step towards building an omnichannel approach and an omnichannel company, I would say. And to do so, I would argue that the biggest challenge was not technology or anything that people usually say, but it was really people and incentives and processes. So when we first tested omnichannel, and people both on our team and on consumers, when we first tested omnichannel, we had a spreadsheet that would control everything. So really an Excel spreadsheet. And the offering was consumers could buy something and receive in their homes in, let's say, 3 days in a certain region of the country, or pick up in a store in 4 days. And consumers, a big chunk of them, would choose to pick up in a store. And that's true, because I say that's not convenient, right? Except it is. Over 80% of Brazilians live in houses and not apartments. They don't have anyone to receive a product, and you cannot leave something at the doorstep in Brazil, unfortunately. So there are a lot of reasons that people would find convenient to go to a store and pick up, to try something and to return if it didn't fit or something along those lines. So I guess that the first challenge was to really understand what would drive convenience to consumers and how could we enhance each channel to provide value to them. And then second was to make the store personnel to actually work to boost e-commerce sales, because in the past, it would be more probable for one of our associates to indicate a store in the mall of a competitor for consumers if he didn't find something than to ask them to go online and buy online. That was the biggest competitor for them, right? Centauro.com.br was a much tougher competitor than any store in the mall. So how to change behavior and how to make that store personnel to really see that e-commerce could boost traffic in the stores, that if they were not to be seen as this hub of sports that could serve consumers in the region, consumers might not come back ever. That was, I would say, key. And it was a process. It was really changing incentives, a lot of talking. And I think that when we did achieve something, that's when we saw the numbers going up. As for the future, I would argue that that channel is overrated in a way. And I would argue that the future of omnichannel is us discussing less channel and more the customer, right? I think that we always talk about channel. We talk about the last click. We talk about where the purchase happened as if it was on that moment that the consumer gave us the money that a purchase happened. But the fact of the matter is that there was a process, right? So he might have navigated online and bought in the store, or the other way around. So we don't actually know that percentage. And I think that the more we separate the channels, the worse our decisions are. So I would argue that it's the dematerialization of the channels could be the future of omnichannel. So seeing the store as a place where you can sell stuff, but not the only place. So you can put support to an associate, but that one associate can sell through WhatsApp or whatever, right? So that's my 2 cents. I think that it's really about thinking more broadly about the consumer journey and less about stores and e-commerce.
Very good, very good. And then, of course, thinking about the store networks becomes also a challenge in itself, right? How to build the conviction to open one more door, right? That becomes quite a challenge. Talking about stores, right? So how can, a lot is said about in-store technology, right? How can a retailer effectively use store technology to improve customer experience? And how do you know, or how can they know what's working, what's not working, given that, everything costs a lot?
I think when it comes to in-store technology, I would say I wouldn't do technology for the sake of technology. There's I think the thinking that we shared before around driving convenience, driving quick and safe access to products, providing differentiated experiences, those have to be the fundamental reasons to adopt specific technologies. So when I think about, smart choices, I mean, there's plenty of examples. I think there's retailers using great apps like the Nike House of Innovation, where you have a pretty connected experience in the store, and you have the ability to know much more about the products and experience the products while you're in the store. There are convenience plays like easier checkouts. I mean, there's many examples of those, of course, through the app. Some people offer vending machines in stores, all the way to fully automated experiences like Amazon Go. And I think those all have a reason for being, because they actually change the experience for the customer in a positive way. On the back end, of course, there's the question around the return on investment. And more often than not, depending on the role of the store, as we were describing before, you may or may not be able to justify the investment. An example of that would be digital shelf labels. Those make a lot of sense in some markets, in some stores, when I don't have many SKUs, when I have a very expensive labor in the stores. Having the ability to change prices or change product information very quickly and automatically has many advantages. The reality is, however, that technology hasn't really been able to have a real business case behind it. In many retailers that have many more SKUs, where labor is not particularly expensive, and as a result, we're seeing less of that. You would see that more in stores where maybe there's an experiential element attached to those displays. And then I think, once again, the concept of agile is important when you think about technology. You want to fail fast. You want to try things out in cheaper ways. You want to mock them up, create wireframes if you're talking about the app, and just start experiencing that technology before you've actually made the big investment. Get consumer input so that you're improving and evolving that before it actually hits the store. And finally, I would say something that we see a lot of retailers doing is actually partnering with some of these technology providers, because they are obviously excited to get their products into stores and prove them out. And as a result, we've seen quite a few retailers taking on those partnerships where the retailer doesn't actually have to take on any cost in their stores in order to try them out and pilot in several stores and determine whether it's the right solution for them.
Thank you. Moving a little bit away from stores now, Pedro, Grupo SBF has recently acquired NWB, right? A content producer, right? And a digital engager. Could you share with us what's the strategy behind this transaction and how it connects to customer experience and engagement?
Can I comment something on stores just before I move to?
Of course.
Fernanda, sorry, but something that Alex mentioned struck me, and which was about how to use technology and how to think about a customer journey. And we had a very practical experience when we moved omni-channel. We also we launched a new store, right? Generation 5, which now it's about 80 of half of our stores. And as we're trying to put that project up, we thought about all technologies that we could use in the store, and we got nowhere. Because basically you can use anything, right? Everything is available. And then we change gears to see, hey, what's the customer journey? What does someone need to do in a store? To find something, to choose, to try on, and to pay. How can we help? And how can you use process, people, and technology to help? But we got into places that were, so the one that makes me more proud is that we're leveraging the sales associate using the recommendation system we have online to help him pick what to present to consumers. So the technology was ours. It was developed. It was just about thinking, how can we increase conversion? How can we have them choose? So I really think that it's really about changing gears and thinking about the customer journey, and then what's the technology, right? And sometimes we get bugged with the nuances of technology, and we feel like we got to use them. And then on NWB, sorry for the detour. So we feel that competition is getting tough and is getting blurred, and the competition on transaction, being efficient, is very tough when you compete with multi-category retailers such as Alibaba's, Amazon's of the world, because they get to know your consumer and transact with the consumer much more often than you do when you're a niche player. So the challenge for us was, how do we compete with them? And then we decided to have a vertical play. So we would be the vertical choice of sports. And we would have an in-depth relationship with consumers in that area. But in order to have an in-depth relationship with someone, you got to meet them more than twice a year. And through selling products, that just didn't happen. Even if it is 5 times a year, it's just not enough. So we thought that we needed to find ways to be on the consumer journey even before they were buying. So the first piece of the strategy is to really be and participate and collect data and engage with consumers while they're watching sports. And NWB happens to have the biggest sports channel in the world, I would say. I could be wrong, but it's one of which is Desimpedidos. So they have billions of views, 80 million followers on Instagram, 60 million subscribers on YouTube with all their channels. So that's one part of what we're acquiring. We're requiring to be engaging with consumers in that space. The second part is on how do we reduce customer acquisition costs, right? So it's getting more and more, as everyone is moving online, things just got more expensive, right? Everyone is bidding on the same words on Google, and then prices go up. So it's getting more expensive to acquire a customer online. And we thought that having a content house producing content on sports could allow us to direct this viewership to this audience, to the retail part of the business. So we could point them out and create very good leads to sell products on Centauro and Fisia, which is the company that owns Nike in Brazil, with projects such as social commerce. So NWB has a content house and a affiliate system for sports influencers. So now we have a business model for those influencers, whereas they can make money with media, as well as they can make money through selling products from Centauro and Fisia. So I would say that those were the things. So one, having engagement with our audience and meeting them more often. And second, reducing acquisition costs for the retail part of the business through pointing the audience towards the retail part. To be seen. It was closed in March. So we love the idea, but to be seen whether it works.
Ana, so I think just like SBF, right? We see other retailers putting content in the heart of their customer experience, right? And in the heart of their engagement model with clients. How do you see other retailers successfully doing that, and how it connects to customer experience for you?
It's a great question. And I would say, actually, we don't just see retailers doing that. We see companies across industries doing that. To give you one example, insurance company DBS, they have launched content where they have local celebrities explain life insurance concepts in small videos. And they've uploaded that as a way to engage, like Pedro said, potential customers actually before their buying journey, right? So much earlier. It helps as a brand building means, right? It helps all of a sudden, your name is associated with being helpful to the customer. You help them on just navigating a new topic that in that case, a lot of folks are unfamiliar with. And so it allows you to find new connection points with your customers across that entire journey. And with that, it can be really powerful.
And both Pedro and Alex, right, they mentioned the notion of consumer journey, right? And I think even yourself earlier on, the notion of consumer journey and understanding how to influence the journey, right?
Yes.
How to prioritize journeys and how to there's lots of different consumers. So how to get thinking about consumer journeys and actually use them in a pragmatic way for your business?
It's a great question, and it's a really irrelevant one, right? Because there are many places where you can start. And so it's actually super important to understand first, before you even start, which of the journeys actually drive the most in terms of customer satisfaction, and then being able to link customer satisfaction to a financial metric, right? Because that will help you to prioritize and say, if I'm going to address pain points in journey X, it's going to be have a better financial outcome for me, right? And it's going to drive more customer experience than if I focus on a journey that either only a few of my customers ever go on, or that actually doesn't drive the experience all that much. And so typically what we recommend is to say, start out by mapping all of your customer journeys that you have. Look at the different touch points that sit within it. And then for each of those journeys, understand what are the core drivers that sit underneath each of the touch points. So what are the drivers of satisfaction with that? And then we do usually a combination of quantitative research and qualitative research. And the quantitative research helps us to understand from a derived standpoint of which are the journeys that actually drive the customer experience the most. And within the journeys, what are the touch points that drive it, and where are we very good, where are we delighting our customers, and where do we have an opportunity to improve? So we do that, and then we combine that with a more qualitative assessment where we say, okay, let's shadow some consumers, let's do some digital diaries, and let's overlay the different personas that we have and actually understand how are different personas going on these different journeys. The qualitative then really makes come it to life much more on what are the things that matter, these pain points. It's a much more visual way to get everyone in the company actually then aligned and have them understand, wow, here are the three most important things that we should tackle when we think about our customer experience.
Thank you. Pedro, does this connect with real life to you? And how does it happen in SBF?
It's a huge question, and it's one that we're tackling. I think that it's really about how you put the organization to work towards that goal, right? And then it's a conversation about ways of working, and in a way, for me, it starts with technology, because that's where the team is more prepared to work on a more customer-oriented, product-oriented, value stream-oriented kind of a business. So for us, it started that way. So it's about putting, as opposed to organizing the teams through processes, organizing the team through value streams. So the first place that we did it was really on the tech team, right? So as opposed to having them on disciplines, we had them thinking about each piece of the value stream. How will we make checkout better? How will we make conversion better? And then every piece of the e-commerce journey. And then the challenge, I would say, is to go and move the organization towards that. So what we're trying to do right now is to think retail that way. So as we have these district managers, they're used to check things and make sure that things are working. And we now separated some of them to think about the journey and to think about how do we make trying products up really good, because it's something you still cannot do online. How do we make the checkout experience frictionless? How do we make, and then you have a group of people that understand operations, trying to enhance the process to make sure you have the highlight of the journey at the right place. Because in the end of the day, it's really the details, right? To have an outstanding experience in the store is really about small changes. So that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to kind of put people thinking through the pieces of the journey and the value stream for the customer, as opposed to sticked parts of the organization.
Mm-hmm. And are you seeing results already? Yes,
it's a moving the target is also moving, right? But it's we're seeing we're evolving. So to be fair, it took us a while to be able to attract and retain the people that would know how to work that way, especially in technology. So it took us a while to make sure that they would feel compelled by the project, and some of the M&As were helpful in that direction. Because in the end of the day, it's all about people, right? So when we finally got the right people, and then great people like to work with great people, and then they brought in even better people, we're able to move towards that direction. So we're seeing a lot in the development of our e-commerce experience. Now that we have our technology organized by product, and we're seeing a very good involvement in the kind of conversations that we're having about the store operations. We still gotta be able to move faster towards implementation, because that's the challenge with brick and mortar. So digitally, you can just implement something, and if it doesn't work, you turn it off, and it's very easy to test and learn. In the brick and mortar space, it's a little bit more complicated, I would say. So we're seeing involvement, but I think that we got to be better at being able to test more things at the same time, and then see what actually works.
And Pedro, you mentioned, right, how important the store operations folks are in this context, right? Are you changing either the profile or the way SBF trains these people in order for them to be able to adapt to this new way of working and new way of thinking, which is very different from what it was 5 years ago or 10 years ago?
So I think it's more about training than about profile. I think that it is very different, but it's not that complicated. So I think there are two pieces. One is to really make everyone part of the new. So we also kind of separate, that's the old company and that's the new company, and then you expect the people working for the old company to make the new happen, and that doesn't work. So putting them into part of what we're building was important, and the project for that was the new store. So when you present something, hey, stores are important, here's the new store, and here's how you will participate, here's how many channels will work at the store, here's the new technology for you to sell products that are on the extended rack and not available here, and here's how that will come to you, was a big part of the answer, I would say. So to bring engagement. And then the second part is how to train them. And what we learned, and sometimes it's amazing how the simple things are the most efficient ones, is that they train themselves. So we basically allowed for a system in which they will figure out what are the relevant processes, and they will make films with their mobiles to train people on how to do the omni-channel process, for instance. So how do you do click and collect? And we had all this material, and it didn't work. And we had a lot of issues. And now they are the ones training themselves, and it works, right? So I would argue that if you engage them and you make it count for them, including financially, not only financially, but including financially, and then you set them up for success, and you allow them to know what exactly to do and how to make the process work, they will be the engine to move us forward. So that's actually has never been a hurdle for us. I think that has success on the omni-channel numbers cannot be pointed to a single thing or team, but if we had to, it will be to the store guys. So they're the ones that are really making this work.
Let's go to the questions sent by our audience. Fernanda, the first one is for you. What interventions are now baseline expectations that companies all need, and where are the best opportunities to go above and beyond?
Oh, okay. So the first thing that comes to my mind about this question is we did surveys here in Brazil, right? And we found out that during COVID, more than half of the people that had never experienced, buying a product or a service online did so during the pandemic, right? And 80% of them are very satisfied with the experiences that they had. So I think what that brings is that people now, most people now, they do expect things to work, digitally speaking, right? And they do expect to have good experiences. So I think, you know, when we go back to the retail business, right, I think baseline is pretty much having the convenience of doing pickup in store, of being able to order online and pick up in store, or being able to do the opposite. And I think that's absolutely expected, right? And the opportunities to go beyond, I would have to go back to what Pedro and Alex were saying in the beginning, right? Retail is in transformation. So either retailers now go beyond, or, you know, retailers might not have, a particular retailer might not have a relevant space in the future.
Pedro, to close, we have a question here for you. We are going through a major humanitarian crisis and economic shock. Resilience and flexibility proved fundamental. What lessons or reflections will you take from this period, and how does this change what you did before?
So we could have a full talk about the things that we did wrong, and I mean it. The bad news for the country is that we had a second wave. And I don't think there's any good news on it, but it allows us to do it again and to have the challenge to perform better. And the one thing that we did on the second wave that I think was a big learning from the first one was to stick to the long-term plan. And it's easier said than done, right? I mean, because when you see the stores closing and you see sales dropping, retailers are people of action. So you want to do stuff to solve the problem immediately, and I feel like it's the right choice here is it's really to focus your efforts on what will build value to the business in the future, because there's nothing that you can do to reopen the stores that are closed due to a health crisis. So what works for us was to work towards the projects that will build value in the future, as opposed to create a lot of energy and dissipate energy trying to create small projects that would work to increase a little bit sales during the pandemic. So that's what we learned. So not doing a lot of the things that would detract you from the real plan.
Okay, so thank you. E muito obrigada, Alex and Fernanda e Pedro, pela conversa de hoje, aos participantes que enviaram suas perguntas. Gostaria muito de agradecer também quem ficou aqui nos últimos 45 minutos, mais ou menos, com a gente. Para conhecer a agenda completa do McKinsey Talks, acesse mckinseytalks.com. Lá vocês podem acessar os episódios anteriores e na segunda-feira, episódio de hoje também vai estar disponível lá. E para quem gosta das versões em áudio, né, podcast, também temos as nossas versões lá no Spotify. Muito obrigada, até a próxima e um bom fim de semana.